Ethan Holloway had traveled the lonely Mescalero Trail dozens of times, but that evening felt different from the start. The wind carried a strange, uneasy quiet, and the sky had begun to dim into a bruised violet. As the sun dropped behind the distant ridges, his horse shifted beneath him as if sensing something ahead. Something out of place. Ethan slowed his pace, eyes scanning the scrub and the scattered boulders along the trail. Then he heard it, a low, pained sound, almost swallowed by the wind. He reined in sharply. Leaving his horse, he moved on foot toward the rocks, stepping carefully so as not to startle whoever or whatever was making that sound. When he rounded a large stone, he stopped short. A young Apache woman lay slumped against it, one hand pressed tightly to her side. Blood stained her buckskin clothing, darkened by dust. Her eyes were open and alert, filled with both pain and defiance. Ethan raised his hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. The land had seen more than enough conflict, and he knew trust was rare on either side. "I'm not your enemy," he said quietly, watching her breathing quicken. "You're hurt. Let me help." For a moment she seemed undecided, her jaw set, her gaze sharp and evaluating. But her strength was fading. She finally gave a breathy nod. Ethan knelt beside her, carefully moving her hand to see the injury. It wasn't a blade wound, nor the mark of a bullet, more like she had fallen onto a jagged rock with force. He rinsed the wound with water from his canteen, tearing strips from his shirt to wrap her side. She winced but made no sound. The discipline and endurance in her silence struck him. When he lifted her, she leaned lightly against him, whispering her name, Taji. Ethan placed her on his horse and walked beside it, guiding them along the trail in the growing darkness. Hours passed before they reached a small, abandoned shepherd's hut he knew of. Inside, he built a fire and offered her warmth and water. The firelight flickered across her face, revealing exhaustion, but also a quiet strength. Taji slept in intervals through the night, and by early dawn she was able to stand. She looked at him one last time, her expression unreadable yet grateful. Without a word, she stepped into the pale morning light and disappeared between the rocks, leaving Ethan alone with the lingering feeling that this chance meeting was far from over. Ethan woke early, the sun just beginning to rise over the foothills, casting a pale glow across the quiet land. His muscles ached from the long walk beside the horse the day before, but the memory of the injured, Apache woman Taji, lingered more strongly than any physical pain. He rubbed his eyes, pushed open the cabin door, and stepped outside to breathe in the cool morning air. That was when he saw it. At first, he thought it was just a scratch in the wood, something caused by weather or an animal brushing past. But when he stepped closer, the truth became unmistakable. Carved deep into the center of his door was a deliberate symbol, two sharply angled lines intersected by a third, almost like the imprint of a talon or a split arrowhead. The edges were fresh, wood shavings still clinging around the cuts. Someone had made this mark only hours ago, likely during the night while he slept inside unaware. Ethan touched the carving with his fingertips. It hadn't been done in haste. The lines were clean, confident. Whoever had left it knew what they were doing and had wanted him to see it. A chill ran up his spine, not from fear, but from the certainty that this was a message meant specifically for him. He thought immediately of Taji. She had disappeared at dawn yesterday, slipping into the rocks without explanation. Had she returned? But why leave a mark instead of knocking? What could it possibly mean? He saddled his horse and rode into town, hoping someone might recognize the symbol. The sheriff only scratched his chin and muttered that the Apache sometimes used signs to guide each other or warn of danger. Though he claimed not to know this one, the townsfolk offered little, more than uneasy glances and half-whispered speculation. Ethan left with more questions than answers, feeling eyes on him as he rode away. Back home that evening, the land around his cabin felt strangely still, as if holding its breath. The carved mark caught the last of the fading light, its shape more unsettling now that the day had passed without clarity. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, staring at it. He didn't believe it was a threat. If Taji had meant him harm, she wouldn't have allowed him to help her. No, this was something else, something important. As darkness settled and the sky filled with stars, Ethan remained outside longer than usual, listening to the silence, wondering who had stood on the same ground just hours before. The desert had delivered him a mystery, carved into his own front door, and he sensed this was only the beginning. Ethan set out before sunrise, driven by the unanswered questions that had kept him awake through most of the night. The symbol carved into his door was more than a curiosity. It felt like a pull, a summons. He followed the Mescalero trail again, letting instinct guide him as much as memory. The land was quiet in the early hours, the desert air sharp and cool. He scanned the ridges and gullies, half hoping and half dreading he might see Taji again. He didn't know what he expected to find, only that turning back was not an option. By midday the sun had risen high, and the land shimmered with heat. Ethan paused to water his horse when a movement caught his eye on a distant ridge. A figure stood there, still, watchful, unmistakably human. Even from afar, he sensed the steadiness in her posture. The moment he recognized her, she stepped forward into clearer view. Taji. He left the horse tethered and climbed the rocky slope toward her. She waited without moving, her expression unreadable, though there was no fear in her gaze this time. When he reached her, she looked him over as if already knowing why he had come. "You return," she said quietly. "I thought the symbol meant you needed help," Ethan answered. "Or that something was wrong?" Taji's eyes softened a little. It was not a cry for help. It was gratitude and a promise. She spoke each word with deliberate weight, as if choosing them carefully. Ethan felt a strange warmth stir in his chest, relief mixed with something deeper he couldn't yet name. Before he could ask more, the brush behind her rustled sharply. Taji's expression changed instantly, her calm replaced by alertness. She took a step closer and placed a steady hand on his arm. "You cannot stay here," she whispered. "There are men on the trail, not from my people. They search for someone, search for you." Ethan frowned, confusion rising. "For me? Why?" Taji shook her head. "There are things moving across this land, things hidden, things dangerous. You helped me, and now you stand close to what others want to keep buried." Her tone was urgent yet gentle. Ethan sensed she was telling him only the smallest piece of the truth. She stepped back, preparing to vanish the way she had the night before. "Go home," she said. "Be watchful. And remember the mark. It means you are not alone." Before Ethan could speak, she slipped into the rocks, dissolving into the landscape like a shadow returning to its source. He stood there, heart pounding, knowing the carved symbol on his door was no longer a mystery. It was a bond and a warning that the quiet life he once knew was already fading behind him.